This episode is brought to you by my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery Group program. If you're listening in real time, new groups are forming in August of 2017. Reserve your spot today by heading over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 152. Welcome to the 152nd episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. Welcome to the show. Today I have another edition of my fertility awareness reality series for you. Today I have Amy on the show. Amy has been using the fertility awareness method for a while now, and when she joined the group, she had actually been charting for about a year, if I remember correctly. And she had lots of questions about mucus. So she joined the group so that she could be really clear on what was happening in her cycles. And Amy is in the stage of avoiding pregnancy at the moment. And so she just really wanted to be really confident using the method for birth control and really clear on which days are fertile and infertile. So we had a lot of fun in the group just going through the specifics of it. One of the things that I love to do is to really help the members of the group take their knowledge to the next level. It's really easy in theory to understand the fertility awareness method. It makes perfect logical sense. It's really the application of it that is where the challenges lie. So I just love to help take women through those stages, the same stages that I went through when I was first learning. As many of you know, my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery Group program is starting right around the corner. So within the next couple of weeks, my next edition of the group will be underway. And I've had a number of women sign up already. So if you're thinking about jumping in and joining the group, I would love to have you. The groups are an amazing opportunity to connect with women who are in very similar stages you are, and not only to learn a ton about your own charts and what's happening with your health and how it intersects with what's happening in your menstrual cycle, but you also have the opportunity to learn from other women who are in similar stages, but perhaps are struggling with different challenges. And so it's really valuable to see how different challenges affect women differently, but even how the same challenge or a similar challenge will affect women differently, because your chart is kind of like a fingerprint or some other type of unique identifier. No two women's charts are the same. And even from cycle to cycle, although there are similarities and patterns that you'll often start to see as you continue charting, no two cycles are ever exactly the same. Not exactly. It's really interesting and really beneficial and really powerful to be able to see how all of these things intersect. Because if you think about it, if you chart your own cycles, you're really seeing your own charts. Even if you're part of online forums where you can see women's charts, you're not having the opportunity to really go in there and discuss them with someone who's been trained and to really understand what's happening in the charts. So not only do you get to see the charts, but you get to understand the context. So what's happening around that, health challenges, and so that you can actually see how they're intersecting. But you also get to have that dialogue around it within that group context. So it's a really powerful experience because it's educational, it's informative, and you have the opportunity to really just speed up the learning process by seeing so many different women's experiences and charts and all the different factors that affect their cycles. For more information, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program and apply today so that we can make sure to reserve your spot. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. And before we jump into today's episode, just a reminder that anything that we talk about on the podcast is intended for informational purposes only. So before you make any changes in your own life, you're going to want to make sure you consult with your team. So your physician, your practitioner, your medical doctor, just keep that in mind that all the women that I work with have a team of professionals in their lives, whether it's their own personal GPs or if they have functional practitioners. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. And today I'm very excited to introduce my guest, Amy, to the show. Amy and I just finished our 10 weeks together. So Amy was a member of my most recent group program, and she was in the birth control group. And it was a smaller group, so we really got to know each other well. We had lots of time one-on-one, and it's so nice to see you just 2 days after it ended, because then it really doesn't even feel like it ended. But Amy wanted to be part of the Fertility Awareness Reality Series. And so I just want to welcome you to the show and thank you for jumping on and being part of the series.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
Well, it is my pleasure. So, I mean, we know each other. It's like we go way back, but maybe you could share a little bit about your own journey and essentially to get our feet wet, your history with hormonal birth control and how you came to learning fertility awareness and charting and all of that.
Yeah, so I was on birth control off and on for about a decade. I got put on it when I was 12 for acne, and I gained a bunch of weight, decided to get off of it. And then it was like a few months on, a few months off for a while. And then I got on the pill again when I was 18, and I took that same pill for like 4.5 years until I was 22 or 22 and a half. So yeah, I just had this really weird feeling that a lot of women have, that the pill was somehow messing with my body. And I knew I wanted to have children, not even in the near future, but in the future. And that I wanted to give my body the time to regulate itself. And I guess the other part of coming off the pill was my acne, because even though initially the pill had helped control my acne, and I'm doing little air quotes just for Lisa. But then the last 3 or 4 years, I started noticing that my acne actually got worse. When I was taking the pill and on the 7-day pill break, my skin cleared up a little bit. So then I got off the pill. My gynecologist actually recommended I read Taking Charge of Your Fertility.
You got a good gynecologist there.
Go her. I have not yet been back to thank her for that advice. But yeah, so that was the eye-opening moment. I think I read the entire book in 2 days. And I was like totally into, why hasn't anybody told me this before? I was told that my body thinks it's pregnant when you're on the pill. And I seriously and truly believed that until I read Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And that was last year in May that I came off the pill and read the book. And so, yeah, I've been charting ever since, and I've discovered some, I guess, issues. My acne's come back and just other things they could improve, I guess I would say. So yeah, that's my journey with hormone. Oh, and yes, of course, Lisa's podcast. I almost forgot about that. I stumbled upon it probably the end of last year, and I've listened to like almost all episodes. So thank you, Lisa, for providing so much valuable information to all of us.
Oh, thanks so much, Amy. And thank you for taking us through and giving us an idea of just your history with hormonal birth control and how you discovered fertility awareness. Because I know it's really helpful for a lot of the women listening, especially because when you don't even realize how many women are really resonating with your own experience. And even the fact that you were on it for acne, that's one of the main reasons why it's terrifying to come off of it. And also a lot of women end up back on it. There's a lot of women out there who just can't imagine coming off the pill. It's something we've talked about a lot on the show. I know a lot of the women that I work with, so in my other group, a lot of the women who are in that group, although they're coming off of it, not all of them, like for example, like when you come off the pill, a lot of women, they don't want to get pregnant right away, but many women come off the pill when they're at that stage where a pregnancy, even though now isn't the right time, a pregnancy, they might be open to it to some degree. But for you, that's not the case right now. So maybe you could share how you managed the fear of coming off of the pill.
Oh my, that's so far back. It seems that way anyways. I told my husband that I don't like the way the pill is making me feel. I don't like the way it's messing with my body. And now it's, I want my acne to be gone. And back then it was also, I want my acne to be gone. And I noticed that when I don't take the pill for 7 days, it gets better. And he does not like using condoms, and neither do I. So we agreed that we would just continue to withdraw, which we had done all the way through high school. Knowing what I know now, whatever, it was very irresponsible, but we managed. And so we've been actually successfully doing that and using withdrawal, even during my fertile window. Every once in a while, we'll do like alternative, just intercourse. I guess it's not intercourse if it's alternative.
Alternative outer course.
Yeah, yes. But yeah, so I fully trusted him that he would be able to withdraw in time. And that basically took all the fear out of it. I knew I had to chart 3 cycles to be confident with my observations. And actually, my very first cycle coming off hormonal birth control, and that was before I was actually charting. I was waiting on my thermometer and I hadn't really quite understood mucus. But before I even had started charting, but after I got off the pill, we had an oopsie. And I did take the plain B pill. So my first cycle after hormonal birth control was actually like some 50 or 60 odd days, and it was anovulatory. But I just attribute that more to plain B. And like, I don't know, because, it might have been the pill, and more than likely a combination of both. But after that first cycle, my cycles came back fairly regularly, between 25 and 35 days, pretty much. And they've been getting more regular the longer I've been off the pill. And I noticed also that I communicate with my husband a lot more. We have our little code for whether or not it's a good day.
Yeah.
So yeah, he always knows when I come and tell him with a big smile on my face that today is a good day. But I think every woman is different with what they need to do in the first few cycles when they're still learning. And I mean, I think condoms are a great option, and abstaining during the fertile window is obviously the best way to ensure that you're not going to end up with an unplanned pregnancy. But withdrawal has always worked for us. And so that's what we use and still do use.
I think it's really helpful to have these conversations as well. Every time I'm working with a client and we're talking about how to manage the fertile window, my clients that use withdrawal, there's always this, it's just, we all have it. So your response is the same. And there's always like a little bit of like inner shame, like we use withdrawal, but at the same time, it's so common. So it's really good for us to bring it out of the closet, so to speak, and talk about it in the open, because a lot of people use withdrawal effectively. It's a big topic because you have to kind of understand that there's just some men that just don't seem to be able to use it. However, when you are really clear on perfect use withdrawal, then you give yourself the 96% effectiveness. As a listener, if you're listening and this is the first time you're listening to the podcast and you just heard me say that withdrawal can be up to 96% effective, that goes against everything you've ever been told. But perfect use withdrawal means, so to kind of go through it really briefly, that before sex, so your partner would urinate, so to clear the urethra so there's no sperm in there. So at some point in the before the sex, he's urinating. And then you have sex, but he withdraws. So, penile, vaginal intercourse, no condom, but then he withdraws well before he ejaculates. And that could mean 10 seconds, that could mean 30 seconds, or it could mean like a minute or longer. But either way, he's pulling out well before he ejaculates, and then he's ejaculating somewhere else. So he's that is up for grabs wherever that's going to be. But ejaculation takes place away from the vulva. So it doesn't take place anywhere near your vulva, because it is possible during your fertile window to get pregnant, even if there's no ejaculation inside of you. It's called a contact pregnancy. And that's if his fluid connects with your fluid. So then he ejaculates away. And then if you decide to go back for a round 2, perfect use withdrawal means that he's going to the bathroom, washing his hands, so there's no semen on his hands. He's washing his penis, so there's no semen on his penis. And he's urinating to clear the urethra so that any future sex that happens the same night, there's no kind of contamination, if you will. But that is perfect use withdrawal in a nutshell. So that was like a sidetrack. Sorry, Amy. I did that for the listener's benefit.
And that's awesome.
And also, I guess maybe you could share a little bit about your acne, because I know we've spoken about it quite a bit and some of the strategies that you can kind of put into place to minimize it. But maybe you could share what your experience has been. And also, I'm curious to know if it does shift throughout your cycle or if it's kind of stationary the whole time.
Definitely does shift throughout my cycle. Pretty much, yeah, like a lot of women, right before my period and the first few days of my period, I flare up. And then there's just differences on where on my face I get it. I've always heard that around the jawline is due to hormonal imbalances, and I definitely do tend to get acne there, but I also get acne a lot on the side of my cheek, more towards like my temple, like my ear. I don't know how to describe it, but so I don't usually have it on my forehead or on my nose, which is another story. But yeah, so I get like the cystic acne a lot. And I used to have more blackheads even when I was on the pill and I was using all these commercial face cleansing scrubs, lotions, and all that. I used to have huge pores around my T-zone, and I would always have these huge blackheads. And then I heard about oil cleansing, so I did that for a while. It didn't end up helping me. And then I found water-only washing on the internet probably 6 months ago. And I've been doing just that. And even though I still do get the cystic acne on like the side of I don't know which word I'm looking for.
The side of your face, like by your temple? I think you said that.
Exactly. Yeah. That and around my jawline. I still do get that. It has let up. But I've also noticed that my overall complexion has dramatically changed. So I almost have zero blackheads. My pores are so small, you can hardly see them. And my skin used to be super oily. After 4 hours of wearing makeup, I would have to take it all off and put it all back on again because it was just so oily. It was just like gross. And now, even at night, I'm like, do I really have to wash my face? Because it's not really oily. And so that's that may or may not have anything to do with the hormones, but it's just a side note on the acne, just some ways I found to manage it better. So I'm doing a lot, but I also know that I probably still have a lot more to do and to go.
Well, I think that you're literally doing everything possible to just give your body what it needs to kind of heal and restore. I think it's a really good sign to hear that your complexion is changing and that you're noticing a difference in the oiliness. Because it's really common when you come off of the pill for you, like if you had acne before, it's like it gets worse before it gets better. Mm-hmm. Because it's like anything else. I mean, when you're on, and you know this, Amy, when you're on hormonal contraceptives, it pauses the whole hormone cycle. And so although it can kind of come back, in your case, it came back fairly quickly, which is really good. It still can take a little bit of time for everything to balance out, for your cycles to really be robust and healthy. And so I feel like it's a good sign that things are kind of getting better. So it's like all the things that you're doing, all the changes that you've made, you've just made them. You've just recently started making them. And so the real test is to do a check-in kind of with yourself. And even, you could even do stuff like take a picture. Because you know how, I don't know if you've ever had that, but sometimes unless you actually take a picture of your face on like the bad day, 2 months later, if things are like kind of better, you're used to it. So it might not seem that big of a deal. But I think it's really important to take the opportunity when you're charting your cycle to really kind of document those things. So whether you kind of just make notes of it on your chart or whether you actually literally take a picture.
And I have done that too.
Yeah. And then like 2 months down the road. So by the time this is releasing, it's going to be August. And so then, September, October, you could reevaluate and see what's helped.
Mm-hmm. One thing that just did throw me off with a pill, like I said, I've noticed when I was on the pill, during my 7-day break, my skin would clear up. And so when I stopped taking the pill, initially for the first 6 months, my skin was like super awesome, amazingly clear and just perfect. And I was just, oh my goodness, this was it. I just had to come off the pill. And so I don't know, that's maybe why it hit me emotionally that much harder when my acne came back worse than ever before. Even though I thought I had figured out, why I was having acne, and all I had to do was come off the pill, just one thing. And so I guess that's just on a side note that the pill messes with you in many ways.
Well, I know you mentioned that in the group, and I did want to ask you, looking back, had anything changed, or was it literally just like randomly out of the blue?
I mean, if anything, I was treating, in quotation marks, my body worse because I had been doing kind of low carb, no grains, but not really at that time. so over the last year, I've been getting more serious and more consistent with the low carb, zero grain. And so, yeah, I mean, if anything, I've improved my health. So, yeah, I really don't know what it was. And maybe it was just the residue hormones, still being in my body that were slowly flushed out. Oh, I guess something that I did want to talk about was testosterone, because also since I've come off the pill, I've noticed just slightly, and maybe I'm just crazy, but I've noticed like the hair on my forearms and my hands and my fingers to like, I guess, increase in number and like maybe get a little bit thicker. It's not dark by any means. I've just noticed that it's gotten more. And so I know that, and also like the belly hair is, due to testosterone. And I know testosterone also has to do with acne, but I just don't know. Like I haven't done a panel or anything, so I don't know if I actually do have too much testosterone. I just like, those are my indicators: acne, belly, a little bit of belly hair, and increasing forearm hair. Yeah. That I've just been thinking about it recently.
Yeah. Well, and I just pulled up your chart so that we can kind of have that as a reference for it. I mean, it's hard to say. There are some clients of mine that have kind of a PCOS profile, and some of those androgen markers are like you mentioned, like on the jawline, the acne, definitely hair, but it's kind of like male pattern hair or like really thick and so there's different ways that it can present. Refresh my memory, but I feel like there were a couple of things we spoke about where it's kind of like you may have had a reason to go to the doctor, but you were not necessarily, like you were kind of, am I going to go or am I not going to go? So if you wanted to check that out, you could certainly, whenever the next time that you're going to see your physician anyways, you could maybe ask, or your awesome gynecologist.
Yes.
But you could ask them to run a panel and see if there's actually elevated androgens. Because there's in your charts, I mean, so just because the listeners can't take a peek at your charts, but typically you're not ovulating later in the cycle. So we don't have any kind of delayed ovulation markers. And the acne you've been working on, and I feel like ultimately there's a couple different things that have kind of shown up that we've spoken about that could be contributing to it. And so typically, as you know, the approach that I take is just to try to figure out what, if anything, is adding additional stress to your body and using your cycle as a way to kind of monitor and marker that. So we've kind of went through all of the lifestyle things. It's like, well, and so the background too is that you're a student. And so there's a certain amount of stress just goes with the territory. Where are you at with actually the stress? Because it's the end of the semester now. Do you have a break?
Well, I'm actually in the middle of my semester because I'm taking summer classes. I think school in Canada has like a different start and end date. But yeah, I finished my spring semester in May, and I don't start my fall semester until the middle of August. But so during the summer, I have an 8-week summer class. I'm actually taking 2 summer classes.
Of course you are.
But it's manageable. It's more manageable, I guess, than the regular semester because I only have, I would say it's 1.5 classes because the other one doesn't put that much weight on it. But yeah, so it's more manageable. So my stress level isn't outrageously, oh my goodness, I'm just not going to go to finals. Yeah. So that's not like a huge concern. And then we've spoken a bit about diet. And I think one of the bigger challenges, I mean, you're already doing it with the low carb, but it's like finding ways to balance sugar consumption. And then we spoke initially, I think it was in one of our group sessions about, because especially since it's occurring around your period, it's related to PMS symptoms. So there's a lot of research about PMS. Actually, I'm sure I've shared this with you. I think I shared the PMS handout with you. Yeah, I feel like we've kind of like talked about all the different things that you can do to address it, but now it's like this annoying stage of implementation where the results are not happening yesterday. And so let me share how you feel about that, because I feel like I can't give you any more homework. Like I've given you all of the homework, but it would just be like mean of me to be like, and do more stuff. Oh, but I love homework.
Obviously, because you're taking summer school.
Well, more or less, I do what has to be done. But yeah, with the supplements and everything, it's like I'm doing all the things. So because I'm taking a pill today, I want to see results tomorrow. That's obviously not how things work. I mean, if there's anything else, Lisa, I would be happy to. I know we've spoken about alcohol and that surely doesn't help, and I'm aware of that. And I guess I just make that decision whether I want to go out and socialize with my friends or whether I want to cure my acne. So it's it usually balances out though. But yeah, if there's anything else that you have for me, I would be more than happy to throw that on top as well.
Well, I mean, I think at this state, I mean, you're doing a lot. So from a dietary standpoint, by eating in a way that doesn't spike your blood sugar, so by focusing on real food at each meal, kind of a combination of protein, fat, and carbohydrates, but obviously just in the diet that you adopted. So maybe when you decided to kind of go zero grain, low carb, what was the reason that you made that decision? Because you did that quite some time ago.
Mm-hmm. I want to say, well, no, that's actually been even longer. So I started doing that probably 2 years ago. My mother had read Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis, and she was like totally convinced, like right off the bat. And so she kept talking about it and talking about it. I'm like, Mom, I was eating my sandwich for lunch and my cereal for breakfast and my healthy granola bar snack. And I just want to eat my healthy whole grains, Mom. And so then she actually came to visit me and brought the book with her. So then I naturally just had to read it. And I was like game from, the start as well. So I've been trying to avoid gluten. I'm not this, oh no, I can't eat this because it has a speck of gluten in it. I was like that for a while, and I just decided that it wasn't worth it, if that makes any sense. I still don't go out of my way unless I have a really bad day of cravings to just consume all the carbs and the gluten I can find. I've been getting better about managing the cravings too, of having like one piece of chocolate instead of the whole bar and stuff. But yeah, so that's what sparked the low grain. I mean, I do feel better, and I notice every time that I do, even if I just eat a dinner roll when we go out to eat, every once in a while, I still feel like, oh, I'm so bloated, and now I feel sluggish and so full, and then 2 hours later, I could, eat again. So yeah, but that's been almost 2 years ago. That's crazy.
Wow, it's been that long. I sometimes joke with my clients who are struggling. It's funny because Wheat Belly, for those of listeners that haven't heard of that book or haven't heard of William Davis, if there was a spectrum about gluten and that you could find literally like the book that was at the end of it, like the book that basically says that gluten is the devil and it's responsible for wars in different countries. Obviously, I'm being silly, but the book that tells you like, don't eat gluten. It's the worst thing ever. His book is at the end of the spectrum. I mean, honestly, when you read his book or listen to his lectures or watch his YouTube videos or whatever it is, it's like you have to recover for a couple of days. Like you want to throw your bread across the room. You want to light it on fire. You're just like, get away from me with your Goliathid. So I think I think that's interesting that's how you kind of came to that. So it's a really important book. Like it's a really interesting read, especially if you've ever wondered, why is it that, because there's not a whole lot of foods that there's like a huge portion, well, I don't know, a significant portion of the population who eats gluten and it actually damages their insides. So, people who have celiac, so if you're listening and you yourself have celiacs or Crohn's or otherwise IBS, like you eat this bread stuff and it literally destroys your insides, like tears your delicate gut to shreds and bloody stool and the whole thing. And so if you've ever wondered, like, how is that possible? It's just bread. How could it possibly be so bad for some people? Then go read Wheat Belly and you will find out why. So I think that it sounds as though you've come to like like you started out in that place because that's where the book leaves you in that place. I've read it. And then it sounds like you've come to like a comfortable medium with that. Because for you, the reason wasn't because it was causing you a ton of physical pain.
Yeah.
Or was it?
No. Yeah, it was like, my mom also said, well, this says it's gonna get rid of your acne, and I also have psoriasis. It's gonna get rid of that too. And I mean, it didn't. Looking back, I think it probably helped, or at least it didn't hurt. I mean, it definitely did not hurt. I'm glad I'm sticking with it right now. Over the course of our group program, I've been just having a lot more energy and willpower, and yes, I'm just gonna be all super healthy. And like at the beginning of our group program, I was kind of like, but I do this all the time. And then Lisa gave me her lovely sugar out of the container story, and that made me feel a little bit better.
Oh yeah. For years, for me as well, sugar is really addictive. And I know for me as a little girl, I ate a lot of sweets. Like I ate gummy candies were a food group, like in my imagination. And I ate a lot of sugar. Looking back, it's really, really bad. So as a little girl, I had lots of cavities. And it wasn't because I didn't brush my teeth, because I brushed my teeth every night. It was because I ate just copious amounts of sugar. And so for me, I can really relate and resonate to that whole thing. But what I found for me that made the biggest difference was shifting to nutrient dense foods. I feel like that makes a really big difference. But overall, I feel like the biggest impact is that I increased my fat ratio. So whatever the ratio is of carbohydrates, fat, and protein, I definitely just eat more foods that I just eat more fat. So butter on things, or eggs, or dairy products, full fat, raw dairy products. But whatever the case is overall, I feel like that for me has made a really big difference in balancing it out, kind of satisfying my hunger so that I'm not craving. So that even if I want some chocolate, typically I've had a good filling meal. So then I'll have a little bit of chocolate, but I won't have like a tub of gummy bears.
And I have noticed that too, especially since I started incorporating bone broth again, and I drink it first thing in the morning, and it's super fatty. And that's basically since the group program started. So that's been really given me some booster motivation that I very much needed.
Well, and I mean, the challenge is, of course, that I want to support you. I too want to see your acne go away like 5 minutes from now. But I feel like if doing this work has taught me anything, it's that the thing to aim for, and I try to talk about it in the group as well, but I feel like the thing to aim for is not this perfect diet where you never eat anything, air quotes, bad, because arguably there is no good or bad food. Like there's just food. And you decide what you're going to eat. Like it's not good or bad. Like bread is not good or bad.
Right. Yeah.
For some people, bread can cause damage to their insides. Like it's not necessarily that bread is bad. It's just that for that person, it's really not the best thing for them at this time. That doesn't make it good or bad. So ultimately, what I would like to encourage you to do is, although you're super motivated to get everything sorted out right now, and that's really good because it's really helpful, because in order to see something different, you have to do something different. So this is good. But at the same time, I would encourage you to really think about it from like kind of pull the lens back and think about, are the things that I'm incorporating now, are those things that I actually can keep up? Like 3 months from now, is this reasonable for me to actually continue to do? And so I feel like something like bone broth is great because it's delicious. It's a good kind of, I find it just to be nice. Like I like warm things. It's like warming, filling, it's yummy.
Yeah. Like sometimes I even forget to drink my cup of coffee in the morning. And I don't think I would have ever imagined that I would say that, but because I'm a coffeeholic. But yeah, sometimes I've managed to reduce my coffee to just 1 cup in the morning. And now sometimes I forget. If my bone broth before I actually cook breakfast, then sometimes I just forget my coffee.
So it's kind of like, what are some positive habits or positive things that you can put into place. And, in terms of the sugar cravings, there's a couple specific strategies that are really helpful for sugar cravings. So one thing that I've also noticed, it plays a really big role in whether or not I'm going to crave sugar specifically, is sleep. Mm-hmm. If I go to bed late and get up early, or otherwise or if I have a rough night with the kids, they're up all night. But either way, if I don't get enough sleep, then the following day, it's clockwork. It is just, and it's not in your head either. It's not in my head. It's actually a hormone reaction. So when you don't get enough sleep, it changes that whole conversation between your leptin and ghrelin hormones. So when you don't get enough sleep, you actually are prone to have specifically carbohydrate cravings. And so that's one thing that you could do that'll make a really big difference. And they've done studies that show that for some people, just getting them enough sleep is enough to help them lose weight. They don't change anything else. So it's a really big deal. So in terms of like craving for sugar, because the reason to focus on sugar is because sugar disrupts hormone balance and is associated with PMS symptoms, so including acne and things like that. So the goal is to do everything we can just to balance your hormones and give your body what it needs so that it can operate optimally. So it's I hear you, cat.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. The listeners are going to want to know what that is. They don't know. They can't. They don't know you have a cat.
Yeah, it's one of my 3 cats. I'm the crazy cat lady.
Aw, but they're so cute. They attended all of the sessions and everything. They're like part of the family.
Yes.
So yes, one of the things is sleep that plays a big role with the sugar cravings. And then another is breakfast. I don't think it's important or necessary for you to force yourself to eat before you're hungry. I think it's fine to start your day with some bone broth and then actually eat when you feel hungry, because not everyone is going to feel like, depending on what time you get up. I know sometimes I get up really, really early. I'll get up at like 5:30 to do some, have some quiet time, do some meditation and a little bit of work before the kids get up. And I'm not eating breakfast at 5:30 in the morning because I'm not actually hungry at 5:30, but I'll have some water or I don't even know if I would have bone broth that early, but either way, so it's not to force yourself to eat breakfast really early, but whenever you're ready to have breakfast, really thinking about that. And I know that you're already on top of that, kind of like switching it up and having some sort of combination of protein, fat, carbohydrates, something that helps your blood sugar to be stable from the start of the day, something filling, and then that will have an impact on the rest of the day as well. Mm-hmm. You're doing it all, Amy.
Thank you.
And we have to put it into perspective. And so all of these amazing changes that you've made them in the past, would you say 2 to 4 weeks?
Yeah. I mean, the majority of them. Yeah. The last probably 4-ish weeks.
Okay. So we got to give it like a full cycle. I feel like, so let me just check where you are in your cycle. And then also you started this cycle with a bang. This is something interesting if you want to share with the audience, because my
experience at the doctor's office.
Yeah, and it was like a cortisone shot that you had to have?
Steroid, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess just the cliff notes was that you had a rash after you went camping, which is totally reasonable, but it wouldn't go away.
Yeah, exactly. And I waited it out and it still wouldn't go away. Yeah, so I had this really weird rash after being at the lake, and I think I waited for a week and a half or almost 2 weeks for it to go away, and I bought some anti-itch cream, hoping it would just go away if I didn't itch so much. And then I decided I had to do something about it. And at the doctor's office, first question was, are you pregnant? Are you sure you're not pregnant? Are you absolutely 100% sure you're not pregnant? No. No, I'm not pregnant. Yes, I'm 100% sure. So the classic, I told Lisa about it in our group session after that happened, and we tried to figure out why my cycle was just so super wonky. But yeah, the doctor he recommended that I get some lotion, like a calamine lotion, and then he ordered a steroid shot. And I'm not making excuses, maybe I am making excuses, but it was the typical father figure, knows everything is going to fix my problems, sort of. I guess that's just how I judged his personality. And he wasn't that interested in listening to me. He did ask me if I bought new clothes, coloring in clothes, could cause rashes. And, I told him not that I was aware of. So he just said, rash, cause unknown, and ordered a steroid shot. And I thought about speaking up, which now I wish I would have. And I told Lisa I didn't want to be that person that goes to the doctor and says, I need your help and I want your opinion, but I don't actually want to do what you're suggesting I do. And so Lisa actually encouraged me and gave me a little pep talk about being, air quotes, that person. And if we had had that conversation maybe before I went, then maybe I would have said, thank you for your opinion. I will think about it. And I don't want a steroid shot right now, and just try the lotion. But long story short, I did end up getting a steroid shot on the first day of my period and on the first day of my cycle, and ended up spotting for 8 days. My periods are normally the heavy, medium, light pattern, and maybe a day of spotting. But yeah, I only had a medium day, a light day, and then just 5 more or 6 more days of spotting. And I asked Lisa, what could this be? And within a minute, we had figured out that something did happen that cycle, and I actually got a steroid shot that week, which cleared out my acne for 2 days, which was nice.
Well, and I think you're being super hard on yourself. So and we already talked. I mean, obviously, I'm obviously with the podcast coming from a natural perspective, but sometimes, I don't know what I would do, Amy. I don't know, because if I went camping and I had a rash all over my body, I might take the shot too, because I don't want the rash, because it was bad. You couldn't sleep. So I think you're being hard on yourself. And at the end of the day, I was like, so did it get rid of the rash? And you were like, yes, it did. So good call, because we don't have the rash. Because you can sleep. But I guess the reason why I invited you to share that story was just because this particular cycle then is a bit of an anomaly. Before we had made the connection between the timing of the shot and what had changed in your cycle, we were just looking at your chart and we were seeing a very irregular for you pattern of bleeding, which is just all these days of just spotting, just on and on and on. Then you realize that the only thing that was different was actually having that shot. So I think it's really important, the message, how all these different things can affect your cycle. But with that in mind, it kind of throws your hormones for a bit of a loop. Your body's coming down from that. Your cycle this month, I don't know. I mean, we're already on day 18. What day is it?
Yeah, I think it's 18.
And we aren't seeing a whole lot of signs that you're moving towards ovulation. So this is not a normal cycle for you. And it could have something to do with that shot, because obviously it did something and it put some stress on your body. It changed your menstruation, because that spotting is literally not something that you have ever had.
Yeah, no, I have not.
Yeah. So I feel like within the context of everything, the theme of our call today is, it's kind of like the way that I talk about what to do when in doubt, which is wait 3 days.
Yep.
If you're ever confused about something, and this is similar to that, because I would expect this cycle to be a little bit wonky, and it already is. And what we're seeing is you had 2 days of barely bleeding, followed by several days of spotting. And then now we're just in dry days. So we've just had dry. Although there is some changes that we saw in your cervix, it's literally we got to wait.
Yeah. Yesterday when I got the higher temperature, I was like, oh my goodness, I ovulated. And this is the typical case of, I should have ovulated by now. And then, not only was this morning's temp lower, but also emphasizing the mucus of the Just Use method. No, I did not ovulate because there were no signs of ovulation. And so even though I would have liked to ovulate on day, 17 or 16, I more than likely did not.
Yeah. And so to put it into context, in your previous cycle, it looks like ovulation happened around day 16 or so, which is pretty typical. The cycle before that, it looks like ovulation happened around day 20. But by this time, we were seeing signs of ovulation. So it's not like ovulation just randomly happened with no warning. You had some mucus for several days before. So I think going into this cycle, it's all the things that we've spoken about in the group. And so for any of the longtime listeners that have kind of listened to a lot of these reality series episodes, one of the themes that often comes up, not every time, but often comes up, is really getting into that mindset of taking each day as it comes and not being really attached to what you think you're supposed to see. And it's only because from my perspective, I've seen I've seen thousands of charts over these years. And so I know that anything can go. And then personally, I've had 2 kids and breastfed, and you kind of, in order to fully use this method and be comfortable with it and even try to figure out how it intermingles with your health, you kind of have to drop and you totally are. You're totally rocking it. You're there. But yeah, you kind of have to forget what's supposed to happen and just focus on what is happening. Because your body's really intelligent, and I think the shot was necessary, but I think it's helpful because if you didn't know how these things could affect your cycle, you probably would be freaking out a little bit, well, this is really weird bleeding. I have no idea why, and why haven't I ovulated yet? What's wrong with me? So instead of having that conversation with yourself, it's more, well, I understand why my cycle's a little bit different this month.
Which is, I find, very empowering just to know that. If I wasn't charting, then it's going to look like my period's going to be a little bit later than it normally is. I would have been freaking out and buying pregnancy tests every day because my period's late, even though my period probably had just, I hadn't ovulated yet. I just find this very empowering for that very reason to say. And I think I basically had that conversation with myself as you were listening, kind of thing. And I basically told myself, oh yeah, I had this shot. I just needed your presence there to kind of guide me through the thought process. But yes, still, I find charting is just very empowering and liberating and body literacy.
Well, and so we've had a lot of time and opportunity to talk about charting technique, observational routine, getting confident with mucus and all of that. We've also spoken about the rules and using the method for birth control and all of those things. So I guess to wrap up, just to kind of get a sense from you where you're at with that and just to make sure we check in about it. Where are you in terms of your own confidence level with the method and with using the method for birth control, and how you're managing withdrawal, and also at what point are you comfortable in your cycle going unprotected at a certain point in your cycle? Where are you kind of at with the progression idea?
So at the moment, I'm just using my post-ovulatory phase for unprotected sex. In this cycle, I had the mindset of, yes, I'm comfortable identifying a dry day. And if given the opportunity, I would have had unprotected sex in the pre-ovulatory phase of the cycle. But then this whole unusual bleeding thing just threw me off. And I had a few unusual mucus observations in there that we spoke about too. And so that kind of just set me back just a little bit. But I think once the cycle comes to an end and I see more dry, 0 dry days, that next cycle, and maybe just even the cycle after that, I'll be comfortable using the method in the pre-ovulatory phase as well. As far as the charting notation, I could not have asked for a better instructor and a better system than Justice. It works so well for me because I actually have words and notations for what I see, whereas before I was like, oh, this is probably sticky. So it's more than nothing, but it's not actually something. So it's probably sticky. Because what is sticky?
Yeah. And then, this charting method actually defines sticky. It gives it a color and a
length.
So it's...
Yeah. So that was very helpful. And I think that, like, one of the reasons that I contacted you, Lisa, was I'm seeing the sticky mucus all the time and I don't know what's going on. And yeah, I mean, turns out that my sticky mucus is just no mucus at all.
Self-slough. Yeah, no, I'm really glad to hear that, because it's literally like it was like I experienced it for myself and I was like, this is amazing. Everything makes sense. This is a dry day. I need to tell everybody on Earth. So we're going to do that. I think I just want to I want to send you some encouragement and really normalize it. I feel like in terms of what you said around your comfort, there's no rush. So with all of, like, we talked about it in our group quite a bit. So there is a progression that you go through when you're learning the method. Mm-hmm. So, you know, in the history of the method, there has not, as far as I know, been a woman. Maybe there has. If you're listening and it's you, you know, awesome. But we ease into this knowledge. We ease into it. So first we have to learn it and understand it intellectually. And then we have to experience it in our bodies. So we have to actually see the temperature shift, and we have to see the mucus dry up and feel the cervical shift. So then we kind of understand it in our bodies. But then we have like 20 to 30 years of programming telling us we're going to get pregnant from having unprotected sex. Mm-hmm. And so then we kind of have to ease into it. And so the natural first stage is when you're really confident and comfortable identifying ovulation. The first time you have unprotected sex is going to be in the post-ovulatory phase.
Yeah.
And it takes a couple of cycles to get really comfortable with that. Because like this cycle, things can happen that can throw you for a loop. And so I feel like, yes, because you were unsure, you use the method, because the method says, if you're unsure, wait 3 days. And if you're still unsure, wait 3 more days. And so this cycle, there was all this weird stuff going on. And so I feel like you were just literally using the method because you were unsure.
That's true. One other thing I wanted to mention about the comfort level of charting is, I had been charting my cycles for a while before I came and talked to you, Lisa. So I feel like that, gives me maybe not even an advantage, but compared to somebody who just learns the method in 10 weeks and has like no prior charting experience, I feel like it did give me a little bit of an advantage that I was charting about a year prior to this. So, maybe if somebody out there is wondering, well, I'm not comfortable with this yet after 10 weeks. And so, yeah, that's just like my background. I was charting for a little while longer.
Yeah, no doubt. And thank you for sharing that, because I know in my interview, in my reality series session with Emily, we talked about that as well, because Emily had been charting for a year before she reached out to me. And I remember when we were talking about it, and I was kind of like, well, to be honest, Emily, like, you've been charting for so long, I'm really hoping I'll be able to really support you and give you something extra. Like, from my perspective, I want to make sure that if you take the class, you're actually getting something out of it. But after working with women of all levels, so whether they've been charting for a while or whether they've never charted before, just learning from an instructor and having that clarity around mucus, I find that it literally helps everybody. Because when I learned this particular method, I had already been charting for at least a year or two. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I definitely had a lot to learn. Like, I thought I knew everything.
Oh yeah.
I did. I knew I was like 21. Like, I knew everything. But no, it was, so I'm happy to hear that, because the goal is to get you to the point that you feel really confident. And I think one of the aspects of that is, just like you said, like, in 10 weeks, you can be 100% like clear on the rules and confident on the application if you jump in right away and you do the charting from the start. But typically, in order to get to the point that you feel it in your bones, mm-hmm. you just have to practice a little longer.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, Amy, to wrap everything up tonight then, well, first of all, do you have we talked about a few different things. We kind of meandered in different directions, but
we always do.
We always do, yes. Was there anything, any other questions you had before we wrap up?
Not in particular, no.
Okay. And for the listener who is inspired by our conversation, or a listener who literally just found the podcast and is just like, oh my gosh, I want to start charting, but I'm afraid. What, if any, advice would you want to give to her?
Come off the pill. That is that is just a given. And be patient with yourself. Don't rush into things. Take the time to chart the cycles and either read Taking Charge of Your Fertility, or even better, take a class from an instructor, because that personalized instruction is just so much more valuable. And don't give up. I know I was pretty fortunate having my cycles basically jump right back to where they belong. I know other women struggle with years of waiting on their period, but don't give up. It's like this peeling back the layers of the onion. If you don't know what's going on, address this one issue, and maybe you find another underlying issue, and then you address that issue. And so be patient and don't try to tackle everything at once, and get an instructor to work with.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, those are really, really good words to end on, because it's definitely a process. And with charting it, it's so helpful because you can see right there in your chart if something isn't right, but you do have to take it layer by layer and piece by piece. So very inspired words. Well, thank you so much for being here, Amy. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Amy. You can find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/152. So fertilityfriday.com/152. It was a lot of fun having the opportunity to chat with Amy. I just want to thank you again, Amy, for coming on the show. It was wonderful having you in the group. Amy brings so much great energy, as you can tell, so much positivity. And in her case, struggling with the challenge of acne, it's not nice. I feel like as a woman of a certain age, to have acne and to really face that challenge of not being a teenager, but having that type of struggle. I feel like Amy has been very brave, very optimistic, and very strong in her conviction to sort it out in natural ways and to really figure this out after coming off of hormonal birth control. And I think that part of Amy's struggle, it really reflects that there's different ways that the body heals. And so sometimes when I'm working with a client, she'll make some, shifts, whether it's diet, lifestyle, things like that we identify based on her charts. And we'll see this kind of dramatic improvement quite abruptly. If you think about from last week's episode with Stacy, she made a few dietary changes, she made a couple shifts, and she saw a very abrupt improvement. And so in cases like that, it's feedback from the body that's telling us very directly, like, this thing that you're doing is not working. And so when you make a shift in that one thing, then that makes a big difference. Other situations aren't always as straightforward and easy. That's why it's helpful to work with someone who has a background and actually kind of work the process. So sometimes it takes a couple of months or longer, depending on what challenges you're facing. Everybody is at a different stage. Everybody's at a different level. I know some of my clients who are actively trying to conceive, depending on your history. So it's a different situation if a woman is coming off of hormonal contraceptives after 15 years of being on them. It's even a different situation if she's used, for instance, like the birth control pill over years, different variations of the pill, versus if she used the shot for a bunch of years. There's differences between women's experiences based on their age, based on their nutritional status, based on their history, based on their stress levels, based on the length of time they used contraceptives, and based on what their experience was like when they were on them. So there's so many differences that manifest differently with different women that will determine how long it will take for us to see those shifts and improvements in your cycle. So whereas some women will start to see shifts quite abruptly, perhaps that second phase when we're doing kind of tweaking and modification, maybe that phase takes a little bit longer. For others, you make a bunch of shifts and changes on the front end, and it takes a little bit of time for that dramatic kind of shift to show up. So I feel like this conversation is helpful just to speak to the truth about working through certain challenges and to really kind of work our expectations. I think one of the challenges for a lot of women is that, especially when you first start charting, so this doesn't apply to Amy so much because she had been charting for quite some time. But what I've seen as an educator is that when you first start charting, you don't really have the experience of seeing a bunch of charts. And so your first 1 or 2 or 3 charts, those are really learning charts. Those are you kind of learning the language, you're learning fertility awareness, you're learning your body. And often when you start charting, you're starting to chart in the midst of another process that's happening. So whether that's in the midst of coming off of of hormonal contraceptives or in the midst of struggling with PCOS or some other type of endocrine challenge or issue. And so then you're learning to chart, so everything's new and you're figuring it all out while your body is also trying to do something of its own. And so that combination can make it a little bit challenging. But from someone who has seen, thousands of charts over, many, many years, what I bring to the conversation is that experience and that knowing that there's no one chart that's going to make or break everything. The knowing that if we continue on this path and really support your body and really pay attention to your cycle and how it responds to all the different factors, whether that's dietary, lifestyle, etc. If we pay really close attention to how your cycle responds and really support your body in the process of healing, the process of clearing if you've been on hormones, detoxifying, those types of things, that, I'm confident because I've seen it before, that although we may not see all the results we want to see in the first month, if we stick with it for a couple of months, then we're going to really start to see those shifts. And I can confidently say that because I've seen it so many times. But it's often hard when you first start charting because you haven't seen it. And so you think, is this going to be like this forever? And it's a little bit harder to trust the process. So if you're in that stage or, at any other stage really with your fertility awareness knowledge, your charting experience, and you're wanting a little bit of extra support, you're wanting to have somebody to work with who really understands this process and has been there and has supported women through it and ultimately believes that your body can do it, then I would invite you to jump in and join my 10-week fertility awareness mastery program. So I only offer it a couple times a year, and we're starting this month. As you listen to this in real time, it's the middle of August. And at the time of this recording, I still have spaces in the group. So I'd love to have you in there. Make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. And of course, I'd like to thank you for hanging out with me today. I appreciate all of you for taking the time to tune into the podcast. If you would like to connect with Amy or a number of other women that I've had on the show in the Fertility Awareness Reality series, then I would also invite you to join my Fertility Friday Facebook community. So you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/community and you'll be redirected to the group. We'll be chatting in there about this episode and future episodes. And so if you'd like an opportunity to actually chat with Amy or Stacy or some of the other ladies who have been on the show, I'd love to have you in there. So thanks again for taking the time to tune into the show. There's thousands and thousands of other podcasts that you could be listening to, but you're listening to mine, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for continuing to support the show and to help me spread the word and spread the message loud and far and everything. The one message I get from women all the time is, why didn't we learn this in junior high? How come I never knew this about my body? And so my mission is to share it and just to keep sharing it until as many women as possible can learn just how important knowing about their menstrual cycles is. And so thank you so much for being here with me today. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.